Hey Marietta's, I'm back with Harley. Let's get to it. And bonus, Trump's gone, leaving behind a country at war with itself, Harley thinks. And who's to say he won't reappear in 2024? She thinks of Arnie's promise from the Terminator. I'll be back. Harley, you there? I am, just thinking. Thinking about another cigarette, as it happens. Now that she started again, she can't seem to get enough of them. Okay, I love you, and I understand you need your space, but if you don't call back tonight or tomorrow, I'll call you again. Fair warning. Roger that, Harley says and end the call. She reaches for her cigarettes, then pushes them away and put her head down on her crossed arm and begins to cry. She cried so much lately. Tears of release after Biden won the election. Tears of horror and belated reaction. Go sit down! Sorry about that, y'all. Reaction after Cher, a monster pretending to be human, went down the elevator shaft. She cried during and after the Capitol riot. Those were tears of rage. Today, tears of grief and loss, except they are also tears of relief. That's awful, but she supposes also human. In March of 2020, COVID swept through almost all of the nursing homes in the states where Harley grew up and can't seem to leave. That wasn't a problem for Harley's Uncle Henry, because at that time he was still living with Harley's mother at Meadowwood Estate. Even then, Uncle Henry has been losing his marbles, a fact of which Harley has been blissfully unaware. He seems pretty much okay on her occasional visits, and Charlotte Gibley kept her own corner, concerned about her brother, strictly to herself, following one of the great unspoken rules of that lady life. If you don't talk about something, if you don't acknowledge it, it isn't there. Harley supposed that's why her mother never sat her down and had a conversation with her when she was 13 and started to develop breasts. By December last year, Charlotte was no longer able to ignore the elephant in the room, which was no elephant but her Geiger brother. Around the time Harley was beginning to suspect Cher might be something more than a local TV reporter, Charlotte enlisted her daughter and her daughter's friend Jerome to help her transfer Uncle Henry to the Rolling Hills Elder Care Facility. This was around the time the first case of the so-called Delta variants began to appear in the United States. A Rolling Hills orderly tested positive for the new and more communicable version of C-19. The orderly had refused the vaccination, claiming they contained bits of fetal tissue from aborted babies. He had read this on the internet. He was sent home, but the damage was done. Delta was losing in roller stones, and soon over 40 of the oldies were suffering various degrees of the illness. A dozen died. Harley, Uncle Henry wasn't one of them. He didn't even get sick. He has been double vaxxed. Charlotte protested, but Harley insisted. And although he tested positive, he never got so much as the sniffles. It was Charlotte who died. An avid Trump supporter. A fact she trumped to her daughter at every opportunity. She refused to get the vaccination or even to wear a mask, except that was at Kroger's and her local bank branch, where they were required. The one Charlotte kept for those occasions was a bright red with MAGA stamped on it. On July 4th, Charlotte attended an anti-mask rally in the state capitol, waving a sign reading, "My body, my choice," a sentiment that did not keep her from being a dominant and anti-abortion. On July 7th, she lost her sense of smell and gained a cough. On the 10th, she was admitted to Mercy Hospital, 9 short blocks from Rolling Hills Care, where her brother was doing fine, physically at least. On the 15th, she was placed on a ventilator. During Charlotte's family brutally short illness, Harley visited versus Zoom. To the very end, Charlotte continued to claim that the coronavirus was a hoax and she just had a bad case of the flu. She died on the 20th, and only strings pulled by Harley partner Pete Huntley prevented her body being stored in the refrigerated trunk that was serving as an adjunct to the morgue. She was taken to the Crossman Funeral Home instead, where the funeral director had quickly arranged his own funeral. A year and a half into the pandemic, he had plenty of experience in such television final rates. Harley finally cries herself out. She thinks about watching a movie, but the idea has no appeal, which is rarely. She thinks about laying down, but she slept a lot since Charlotte died. She supposed that how her mind is dealing with grief. She doesn't want to read a book either. She doubts if she could keep track of the words. There's a hole where her mother used to be. It's as simple as that. The two of them had a difficult relationship which only got worse when Harley started to pull away. Her success in doing what was largely down to Bill Hodges. Harley grief was bad when Bill passed. Pancreatic cancer, but the grief she felt now is somehow deeper, more complicated, because Charlotte Gibney was, tell the truth and shame the devil, a woman who specialized in smother love, at least when it came to her daughter. Their estrangement only got worse with Charlotte's wholehearted embrace of the ex-president. There has been a few face-to-face visits in the last 2 years, the final one on the previous Christmas, when Charlotte cooked all of what she imagined were Harley's favorite foods. Every one of which reminded Harley of her unhappy, lonely childhood. She has 2 phones on her desk, her personal and her business. Finders Keepers has been busy during the time of the pandemic, although investigation has become rather tricky. The firm is shut down now, with messages on her office phone, and Pete Huntley saying the agency will be closed until August 1st. She considered adding because of death in the family and decided that was no one's business. When she checked the office phone now, it's only because she's on autopilot for the time being. She sees she got 4 calls during the 40 minutes while she was attending her mother's funeral, all from the same number. The caller had also left 4 voicemails. Harley thinks briefly of simply erasing them. She has no more desire to take on a case than she has to watch a movie or read a book. But she can't do that any more than she can leave a picture hanging crooked on her bed unmade. Listening doesn't render an obligation to call back. She tells herself and push play for the first voicemail. It came in at 1:02 p.m. just about the time the last Charlotte Gibney show got going. Hello, this is Penelope Dow. I know you're closed, but this is a very important, an emergency, in fact. I hope you'll call me back as soon as possible. Your agency was suggested to me by Detective Isabel James. That's where the message ends. Of course, Harley knows who Izzy James is. She used to be Pete's partner when Pete was still on the cop. But that isn't what strikes her about the message. What hits and hard is how much Penelope sounds like Harley's late mother. It's not so much the voice at the Paul Ball, anxiety in the voice. What in the world? And she passed on that constant nagging in her daughters like a virus. Like C-19 in fact. Harley decides not to listen to the rest of the anxious Penelope message. The lady will have to wait. Pete sure isn't going to be doing any legal work for a while. He tested positive for C-19 a week before Charlotte died. He was double vaxxed and isn't too sick. Says it more like a heavy cold than a flu. But he's quarantined and will be for some time. Harley stands at the living room window of her tidy little apartment, looking down at the street and remembering the last meal with her mother. Charlotte has said Sherry and a sighting on top, but with that constant anxiety pausing away underneath. The authentic Christmas dinner had consists of dry turkey, lumpy mashed potatoes, and flabby spears of asparagus. Oh, and dimpled glasses of Mocha David wine to toast with. How terrible that meal had been, and how terrible that has been their last. Did Harley say, "I love you, Mom," before she drove away the next morning? She thinks so, but can't remember for sure. All she can remember for sure is the relief she felt when she turned The first corner in her mother's house is no longer in the rear view mirror. And I'll be back.